The date is February 13th, 2012, and I'm interviewing Kevin Osburn with Rundell Ernstberger in the chapel room of the old elementary school at St. Mary's.
Yes.
On Vermont Street. Welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
What were some of the projects that Rundell Ernstberger and Associates were designing back in 90 and 91?
I'd say the first major trail and greenway project I started working on was the Maple City Greenway, which is in Goshen, Indiana.
And what was your job with that?
Well, I personally was a project manager on that, but we, at the time, the mayor there, Mayor Mike Puro, who's obviously no longer the mayor, but he was a newly elected mayor, and he ran on a platform of parks and recreation, improving parks in Goshen. So they were one of the first communities in the state to pursue and receive a Transportation Enhancement grant, which was a new federal program that was specifically targeted for trails and greenways.
What year was this?
So this was in 1992. We started working with the city of Goshen.
How long did the Goshen project, Maple City project, take?
Well, I think we worked from roughly 92 all the way through the 90s, maybe into the early 2000s, to implement 5 different phases of that project. We initially, when we first started working with the city, we developed a master plan, if you will. We sort of laid out all the possibilities of how a trail system could run through the community to connect all of the different community amenities and resources. Their schools, their parks, their libraries, their downtown. And with that master plan in place, we were able to sort of pick apart different phases of the plan and go after different grants for each phase. So over the course of, roughly 10 years, we were able to put in about 15 miles of trail.
Congratulations for doing that.
Thank you.
So that ran about 10 years. Mm-hmm. You're something of the, I don't know if you consider yourself top of the game, but I do, having worked on the cultural trail, but the Monon and so many others. But I can see a stepping up, similar to what Indianapolis has done over 40 years of developing, or 30 years developing a sports mentality and convention mentality. I can see I was just thinking when you were talking, what Goshen has is a miniature of our cultural trail. So you were connecting nodes.
It really was, yeah. It was
by designating certain sidewalks as having certain pavements and connecting the nodes, and then building and fades and building up from there. But clearly it just didn't all come at once, so there were other projects. What was another project after the Maple City?
Shortly after we started the Maple City Greenway, we were selected by the city of Indianapolis as part of a team to prepare a master plan for the Monon Rail Trail. And that was, I believe, in 93 or 94. So it was only a year or two behind when we really started working with Goshen. And of course, everyone knows the Monon Trail now. It's obviously a very well-known rail to trail project. But back then, in the early 90s, the Monon was an abandoned rail corridor that ran not only through Indianapolis but through a variety of different communities within the city. REA not only prepared the design, and I'll go into that in a second, but we also prepared construction documents. We're a lot of people, I think, believe that landscape architecture firms and planning firms like ours simply come up with some concepts and then hand them over to someone to execute. Well, that's not how we work. We prepare finished construction drawings for the designs that we've worked on, and we bid those to contractors. And then once they're bid, we help oversee the construction and administer the construction to make sure it's what they're building is what we've designed.
Can you give me an example of where the collaboration and where some
Sure.
of this detail works together?
Well, let's just talk about the design of the Monon. We felt like there was a long history of the Monon Railroad in Indiana that needed to become a visible part of the design of the Monon. We felt there was a heritage there that people needed to know about. One example is the bridges. I think in the corridor we were working on, there was a total of 7 different bridges. Some of them crossed roadways, some of them crossed streams, so the Indianapolis Canal, the White River. And we saw the bridges as a unique opportunity to sort of talk about the history of the Monon. So if you take for example, the bridge in Broad Ripple that crosses the Central Canal, we saw there as an opportunity to use the Monon Railroad's colors and their specific logo and lettering that was used. Was a very conscious sort of redesign that they did in the after World War II in the 1940s and early 50s. They hired an industrial designer named Raymond Loewy, who was world-renowned for his work with automobiles and planes, and they brought him in to create this streamlined design for their trains. And so the logos that you see out there on the trail today and the color schemes were all developed by Raymond Loewy early in mid part of the 20th century. So we use that not only in the design of the bridges, but in the signage program for the entire corridor. You'll see Monon Rail Trail signs that not only let trail users know where the trail is, but they let crossing vehicles and cars passing by know where the trail is. Those signs, that signage program that we developed for the Monon eventually was adopted by the city as the standard for all of their greenways trails. So,
That's the sign with the sort of peppermint stripe coloring
Right.
for whatever
Yeah.
color each trail segment is.
Yes.
Okay.
That was something that we REA developed initially for the Monon Trail, and then it was liked so much by the city and by the Parks Department that we adopted it and developed standards for signage for all the other trails in the system.
Who came up with? Did you come up with the idea of having these peppermint stripe sign posts?
Yeah.
Oh, congratulations.
Yeah.
Well, it's details like that do make for the trail, but then you follow through that with so many other ways.
It's
So
the small details that add up. Yeah.
what was another project that came from?
Well, probably that takes us almost to current day. For the last 6 years, the project that I've mostly been focused on, although it's winding down as far as our work goes, is the Indianapolis Cultural Trail.
A legacy of the Glick family.
That's right.
Can't
That's
forget
right.
the Glick family
Yes.
in there.
And of course, it wouldn't have happened without the Glick family. So that's been a very significant project.
But
for
first
us.
and foremost,
The most significant project.
first and foremost of significance, we have to say that the Cultural Trail, for all its artwork that's involved, for all its ecology work, the sunken grasslands and so forth, it had a budget that was beyond all expectation of any other project, particularly of its size, because I've thought when I've talked to other people, for the $55 or so million, I could build a dirt trail from here to Chicago, and it would be rough,
Sure.
but a few bridges, but clearly this has been an interesting design. Tell me about what was going through your minds and the minds of Rundell and Ernstberger when you were reading the first bid invitations?
At first I thought a trail on the streets of downtown Indianapolis, and how's that going to work? I never really even conceived of the idea. But this was, again, also happening at a time when, so this is 2005, 2006, when bicycling as a form of transportation, not simply a form of recreation, but as a form of transportation, was becoming more and more known, more and more accepted across the country. So, cities like Portland, obviously, were sort of pioneers in the effort to sort of integrate bicycling as a key component of their transportation planning and design of their streets. Other cities in the U.S., Boulder, Seattle, were beginning to do the same thing, but also cities around the world. Bogota, Colombia, Paris, France, obviously the Netherlands, and Copenhagen. We were very excited about the whole idea. I had the opportunity to meet with Brian Payne. He's the brain. This was his idea. And without Brian, this project would not have gotten off the ground. Period. Not only because of the funding need and the need to raise money for the project, but simply because it at the time was such an out of the box, outlandish idea. How do we take the Monon experience, the Monon Trail, and create, which is a greenway, linear park, and turn that into an urban greenway? How do we extend the connectivity and the ability to ride your bike, or walk from place to place that the Monon provides, and bring that into the streets of downtown Indianapolis? How do we connect to all the major cultural destinations? How do we create essentially a downtown hub for our countywide greenway system? It's not easy to forget, really, that up until a few years ago, most of our greenways that came in to the downtown area essentially stopped outside the mile square, and they weren't tied together. They weren't linked. That, I think, is one of the key, achievements of the Cultural Trail. It connects to the Monon. It connects to White River Greenway. It now connects to Pleasant Run. So it really ties all of these systems together. It's a completely different facility than our greenways, but you can now ride your bike safely or walk safely on this facility to get to any destination you need to get to. And that, coupled, with the bike lanes that the city has put in, really makes it our downtown area much more bicycle friendly than it was 5-6 years ago.
Now that the Cultural Trail is almost finished, what's the next big, or what big wave is coming your way now?
We're working on a number of projects. We're still continuing to work on a number of different trail projects and a number of different parks projects. I think for us, the Cultural Trail has been kind of a landmark project, obviously, for our firm and for our city. Our interest and our hope is that we can begin to talk to other communities and other cities about working for them to implement, similar
to
projects.
Export the expertise of Rundell
Sure.
Ernstberger, but the whole design of the Cultural Trail out
Sure.
to other. Is that possible, since the Cultural Trail is copyrighted? It'll have to.
Well, it wouldn't be called the Cultural Trail, but the idea of making your streets walkable and pedestrian friendly and accommodate bicyclists, and beginning to think of your streets more than simply a facility for cars and trucks. the whole sort of complete streets initiative.
It's sort of a complete cities. When you connect nodes, you have a more complete city.
Well, that's right. It's that we think about this as a transportation facility, but maybe even more important than that is the economic impact, the economic development that these kinds of facilities bring. If you're creating a pleasant place to walk or a pleasant place to bike, you're also attracting businesses and developers that want to locate along that facility. Because they know that they have there's in a way a captive audience of potential customers on these facilities. So it adds to the traffic going by your storefront, as a simple way of thinking about it, when you can introduce pedestrians and bicyclists to areas where they really weren't before.